Chair hears the message and thanks the committee. The chair is very pleased to welcome in the gallery the first family and friends of the state of Maine. Will they all please stand and accept the greetings of the convention? Chair recognizes Senator from Saginaw, Senator Vitelli.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, I move a convention order and request its passage.
Senator from Saginaw, Senator Vitelli presents a convention order, moves its passage. Secretary, read the order.
Order that a committee be appointed to wait upon the Honorable Janet T. Mills, Governor of the State of Maine, and Chief Justice Valerie Stanfill, extending to them an invitation to attend this convention. Hereby extend to Governor Janet T. Mills an invitation to make such communication that she may be pleased to make.
It's a pleasure of convention. This order received passage. It's a vote. The chair will appoint the following on the part of the Senate: the Senator from Androscoggin, Senator Rotundo; the Senator from Cumberland, Senator Doosan; and the Senator from Oxford, Senator Bennett. The chair will also appoint the following on the part of the House: the representative from Freeport, Representative Sachs; representative from Raymond, Representative Fay; representative from Portland, Representative Collins; representative from St. George, Representative Matlack; representative from Westbrook, Representative Gatine; representative from Brunswick, Representative Ankleys; the representative from Madison, Representative Ducharme; representative from Waterford, Representative Millett; the representative from Buxton, Representative Blair; and the representative from Buxton, Representative Carlo. The chair would ask the committee to form the well of the House, and the Sergeant at Arms will escort the committee to the governor's office. The chair is pleased to recognize in the gallery the constitutional and statutory officers of the state of Maine, Secretary of State Shenna Bellows, Attorney General Aaron Fry, State Treasurer Henry Beck, and State Auditor Matt Dunlap. Will they all please rise and accept the greetings of the convention? Chair is also pleased to recognize in the gallery members of the judicial branch: Amy Quinlan, Esquire, State Court Administrator. Would you please rise and accept the greetings of the convention? Chair is also pleased to recognize in the gallery one of the Maine's tribal leaders, Vice Chief Ernest Neptune of the Passamaquoddy tribe of Sipiak. Would the Vice Chief please rise and accept the greetings of the legislature? Not loud enough? Convention will be at ease. Yeah, fine. I am not going anywhere. No, we're ready. kicks it.
Yeah. Act right, act right.
We don't typically stream at the beginning anyway, so.
No, right. That's why we're trying to figure this out now. Give it a try.
Convention will come to order. Chair is pleased to recognize up in the gallery some of Maine's municipal leaders. Carl Shaleen, the mayor of Lewiston, and once again the Honorable Mark Dion of Portland. Will they please rise and accept the greetings of the Maine Convention? The chair is also pleased to recognize the gallery leaders of higher education for the state of Maine. Daniel Malloy, Chancellor of the University of Maine System, Dr. Joan Farini-Mundy, President of the University of Maine, and David Dagler, President of the Community College System. Will they all please rise and accept the greetings of the convention? Chair is pleased to recognize in the gallery members of the military. Master Sergeant Stephen Archibald, Maine Army National Guard. Petty Officer Second Class Rebecca Porter, U.S. Coast Guard. And Sergeant Nathan White, Maine Army National Guard. Would they all please rise and accept the greetings of the convention? The chair is pleased to recognize in the gallery members of the Governor's Cabinet, Commissioners and Department Heads, Commissioner Judy Camuso, Commissioner Douglas Farnham, Commissioner Kristen Figueroa, Commissioner Heather Johnson, Commissioner Patrick Kelleher, Commissioner Jean Lambrew, Commissioner Randall Liberty, Commissioner Melanie Loisum, Commissioner Pender Macon, Commissioner John Rhodey, Commissioner Mike Soschuk, Commissioner Bruce Van Note, and Adjutant General Diane Dunn. Will they please rise and accept the greetings of the convention? Chair was an error. Chair would also like to recognize up in the gallery General Farnham. Chair recognizes the senator from Androscoggin, Senator Rotundo. Chair hears the message and thanks the committee. Oh, really?
So apparently it's not streaming to our legislative building or at the website. That's on the people.
somebody stop them out there? Or?
No, I don't know if they ended up fixing it.
Oh, really?
They rebooted.
Broke forever.
No clue. It's not mine. Wow, set up no one to it.
Hmm.
They're looking into it, but
Jump start.
I don't even know who to like ask. It's late or
Rob on it.
yeah, they're looking at it. I don't know. I don't know if they can fix it. So.
Does it go? Go for Rob.
Hear ye, hear ye. Make way, make way. Make way for Her Excellency, the Governor and Commander-in-Chief of the State of Maine, the Honorable Janet T. Mills, and the Chief Justice of the Maine Supreme Court, the Honorable Valerie Stanfield.
Chair is pleased to recognize and welcome the Honorable Janet T. Mills, Governor of the State of Maine, accompanied by the Honorable Valerie Stanfield, Chief Justice of the Maine Supreme Judicial Court. The chair would like to thank this evening's herald, Staff Sergeant Gary Allen Cropley Tucker from the 101st Air Refueling Wing, Maine Army National Guard. Would he please rise and accept the greetings of the convention? The chair would now request Governor Janet T. Mills to please step forward and address the convention.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Mr. President and Madam Speaker, Madam Chief Justice, distinguished members of the 131st Legislature, and members of my extraordinary cabinet and honored guests, thank you for joining me tonight. I'm pleased to be joined also by the constitutional officers of our state and by the members of my cabinet, as I mentioned, including Major General Douglas Farnham, who is retiring next month, and Brigadier General Diane Dunn, soon to become the first woman Commissioner of Veterans and Emergency Management. Thank you for being here. Please join me in recognizing Major General Farnham's nearly 40 years of decorated service and in welcoming Brigadier General Dunn. Again. I'm also joined tonight by members of my family, including my daughter Tammy and my sister Dr. Dora Mills and her children Anthony and Julia, and my brothers Peter and Paul. Tonight we're sadly missing my brother David, who passed away last Friday, and I honor him tonight in my thoughts. My approach to the state of the state this year is a little unorthodox and a departure from those of the past. A change from the tradition in which the Chief Justice stands and before you to discuss a series of high-profile issues, challenges, and opportunities. But a State of the State address, true to its storied purpose, must be a reflection of the times. These times, especially these past few months, have been anything but normal for Maine. Maine people value straight talk, so I'll put it to you straight. We have had a very rough couple of months. We've been sorely tested time and time again. We have some pretty serious stuff to talk about. In late October, a gunman took the lives of 18 innocent citizens from ages 14 to 76 and injured many more, physically and emotionally, in an act of senseless and unconscionable violence that devastated our communities and shook our sense of security. The worst mass shooting in Maine history, the 10th worst in our nation's history. Then in December, another traumatic event hit us as heavy rains and powerful winds brought massive flooding that destroyed homes and businesses, roads and bridges. 4 people lost their lives. And in January, 2 more violent storms caused some of the highest tides ever, which swept fish houses into the sea and kicked pilings out from under once sturdy piers, broke dunes and breakwaters, chewed up roads and seawalls, wiped storekeepers dry of stock, and changed the very landscape of our coast. These things break our hearts. Now, Maine people do not welcome crisis or disaster, but we will always rise to meet them. And in these difficult times, when it sometimes feels like we have little control over our fate and our future, the people of Maine have banded together in support of one another and our communities and our state like never before. And it is because of Maine people, because of their undying and unyielding resilience and resolve in the hardest of times, that the state of our state is strong. And it is because of you, the people of Maine, that I am more confident than ever before in the future of our state and in our ability to prepare for and overcome whatever challenges the future has in store. What gives me cause for such optimism in the face of such loss and hardship? Look no further than the simple acts of kindness, compassion, and generosity demonstrated by people across Maine in the wake of these recent storms. When Doug Hartkoff's dairy barn in Albion was destroyed by powerful winds, his neighbors brought all his cows to safety and shelter. When the fishing boat, the Tara Lynn II, ran aground on the rocks of Cape Elizabeth at the height of the storm, fire and rescue crews braved those rough seas twice in the middle of the night to rescue all 4 people on board. And when the storms in January threatened to toss J.O. Brown's boatyard into the sea, that fixture that has withstood storms since 1855, this whole community stepped up to save it, young and old, friends and family. And when the storm receded and the boatyard still stood strong and tall, owner Foy Brown said, "It worked," he said. "It worked because the whole town turned out for us." Yep, that's what Maine people do. We take care of each other. We roll up our sleeves and we rebuild. With help from the federal government and the support of this legislature, and with the ingenuity and grit that are the hallmarks of Maine people, we will rebuild stronger than ever. Like other states, also feeling the brunt of extreme weather events, Maine is not safe from climate change. We know more storms will come, and make no mistake about it. It is climate change that is causing storms to be more frequent, more intense, and more devastating. The ocean is warming, the sea is rising, the winds are wilder. We no longer know the storms and winters of yesterday, because when we burn fossil fuels like gasoline, oil, and natural gas, we expel harmful greenhouse gases into the atmosphere. And those gases envelop our planet, trap heat and moisture that melts the ancient glaciers, raises sea levels, and increases global temperatures. The scientists know this. The meteorologists know this. Farmers, fishermen, foresters know this. Our sportsmen know this. Our kids know this. We all know this now. We will address climate change in the long term by investing in clean energy, by weatherizing homes and businesses, by expanding our state's network of EV chargers, and by advancing cleaner and more efficient technologies like heat pumps, while also creating good-paying, green-collar jobs. And informed by the work of the Maine Climate Council, those scientists, citizens, business leaders, and state and local officials, we lead the nation in many of these respects. In fact, we've exceeded our original goal for installing heat pumps, and we've set a new, more ambitious goal. And as a result of our clean energy initiatives, we're seeing significant capital investments in this state that are creating new jobs and new businesses. We have the fastest growing clean energy economy in all of New England. We must and we will continue to address climate change in the long term for the health of our people, the health of our environment, the health of our economy. But we've got to take immediate steps right now to make our towns, homes, and businesses more resilient to climate change and these awful storms. Thankfully, we've laid the groundwork for how we do that. In 2021, with the support of the Maine Climate Council, we organized the Community Resilience Partnership, which helps communities plan for the impacts of climate change. 175 cities, towns, and tribal governments have taken part in this voluntary program, and we awarded more than $6 million to them. One of those communities is Rockland, a city that was hard hit by the recent storms, as you know. Recognizing that its waterfront piers and seawall are deteriorating and in need of repairs, even before the storm, these resiliency funds they use not only to plan for the rebuild of the pier and seawall, but they use them to make long-desired improvements to public spaces and infrastructure. Having that plan in place gives Rockland a clear path towards obtaining other available funds and to protecting and strengthening its downtown waterfront. This is important work. Cities and towns across Maine are on the front lines of climate change, and these recent storms underscore the importance of fortifying them in the long term. And so tonight I'm proposing to add $5 million to our Community Resilience Partnership to allow another 100 cities, towns, and tribal governments to identify their vulnerabilities to extreme weather events and to be ready for the next storm, the next flood, the next washouts, the next threats to our bridges, piers, and homes. Let's give them the tools to continue this desperately needed work. And let's turn those plans into action. In 2021, we created the Maine Infrastructure Adaptation Fund that provides grants to municipalities, tribal governments, and others to improve infrastructure that is vulnerable to flooding or rising sea levels and other weather events. Exactly the type of upgrades that will help communities better withstand the type of storms we're seeing now. For example, in Kennebunkport, the town is using a grant to raise the road that leads to Bickford Island and the utilities underneath it, and to improve stormwater runoff in order to mitigate the impacts of flooding, prevent road closures, reduce disruption for commercial fishermen, and the need for costly repairs. And in Winslow, they're replacing stormwater structures with larger ones that will handle more water to reduce the risk of flooding and property damage. These are common sense projects that will strengthen our resiliency in the long run. And tonight I propose that we bolster this infrastructure fund with $50 million from our record high rainy day fund to allow Maine communities to build and rebuild infrastructure, roads, culverts, working waterfronts, stormwater systems, make them tough enough to withstand the impacts of climate change. Essentially, I'm talking about taking from the rainy day fund to respond to some pretty rainy days we've had and some pretty rainy days ahead. At the same time, we will seek every available federal dollar for disaster assistance and resiliency. But the sooner we pass the supplemental budget, the sooner we can get state funds to contractors and fishermen and towns to get things up and running once again before the height of fishing season. It's urgent. And as we recover and rebuild from past storms, as we prepare for those to come, so too will we recover and repair from those shocking events that have threatened our personal security, our community safety, the very character of our state. It is time to have a conversation about violence. Violence in the media that pervades our subconscious. Violence in homes, streets, towns, and schools. Violence in America, violence abroad, violence that has been an all too common and all too wrong way to resolve differences. Violence that we know all too well this past year on a scale previously unknown to us. On Monday, October 23rd, we boasted that we were the safest state in the nation, with the lowest violent crime rate in the country, according to the FBI. We relished the easy comfort of this brand that attracts people to our state, the sense of personal safety, along with our natural beauty and the sense of place and community unmatched in other parts of the country. But on October 25th, everything changed. Folks at Just in Time Recreation and at Schmenge's Bar and Grill in Lewiston, just doing what many people in Maine do all the time, bowling with their kids, enjoying a cold beer and a game of cornhole after work, spending time with family and friends. Those people had their lives shattered by gunfire. Darkness descended on our state. 18 people lost their lives to a senseless act of violence. Many others injured. Tens of thousands of people sheltered in place for several days. Restaurants, shops, retailers, public buildings were shuttered. College students locked themselves in libraries and dorms and classrooms. Our streets emptied, and an eerie pall of silence enveloped our state. But those moments of darkness were also punctuated by great heroism. Heroism when Jason Walker, Michael Delorier, and Joe Walker each rushed the shooter in a courageous attempt to stop him and lost their lives. Or when Tom Ghiberti instinctively ushered a group of children out the back door of that bowling alley, getting shot himself 7 times in the legs while saving those young lives. Or when someone still unknown turned the lights off at Schemengees to obscure the shooter's vision. Thank God. And there was heroism as first responders came from far and wide to help, and when every doctor, nurse, and healthcare worker at Central Maine Medical Center answered the call and came running and did everything they could to save lives. And when ASL interpreters from near and far, though reeling from the loss of 4 of their own, stepped up in their own moment of grief to ensure that crucial information was delivered to those who are deaf and hard of hearing, and so many more. Ordinary people demonstrating extraordinary courage, an example of the resilience and resolve of Maine people. And tonight we are joined by Tom Ghiberti and by Lewiston Police Chief David St. Pierre, Lisbon Police Chief Brian McGee, Maine State Police Lieutenant Colonel Brian Scott, all of whom worked with an incredible team of state, county, local, federal officials, and by our wonderful ASL interpreters, Regan Thibodeau, Amanda Eisenhart, and Julia Schaefer, who remain on the job today. Thank you. Thank you, Tom. Another fact about Tom Ghiberti is he was the state senior candlepin bowling champion in 2022. Just put the icing on the cake. Tonight we acknowledge all of them, recognizing their heroism and that of their loved ones, and in honoring the memories of those we lost. Please know that Maine people are standing by your side, offering what comfort we can in a moment of immeasurable pain. Though we know that the pain and hardship of October's tragedy will last a lifetime. And in recognition of that, I propose that we create a fund similar to the one they created in Virginia last year to cover the medical needs, the health needs of those injured last October long into the future. I propose that we capitalize it with an initial investment of $5 million. We know the road to healing will be long, but we will help you walk it. We also know that many people in Maine still feel a lingering sense of anxiety and vulnerability, a feeling of being unsafe. Our calm complacency has been shaken to the core. Now, I know there are some who may prefer to consider the shootings an aberration, the product of one unstable individual who went on an unconscionable rampage that is unlikely to reoccur. But hey, many people felt it was unlikely to occur before October 25th. And honestly, the hope that it won't happen again is of little comfort to the children, the grandchildren, the wives, partners, and parents who in an instant lost a child, a spouse, a breadwinner, a staple of the community, and who now face an uncertain future without them. It gives no comfort to the people of our second largest city and its surrounding towns, or to all the businesses, schools, shops, and homes where a shooter on the run required them to shelter in place for 48 long hours. It gives no comfort at all to the people last April who were shot by a violent felon recently released from prison while they were simply driving down a public highway, minding their business. This after he had already killed his parents and 2 other people in their home. It gives no comfort to the families who have lost loved ones to the tragedy of suicide or domestic violence. Yes, we're different than other states, but violence is here. It does exist here in the state of Maine. And it strikes at the very heart of who we are and everything we hold dear for this precious place we call home. I've heard some say that no matter the law, a dangerous person will always find a way, and no new laws can prevent that. There is some truth to that. A person who's intent on doing harm to himself or themselves or others, for whatever reason, may well succeed. But boy, the idea that we shouldn't make laws, change policies just because they'll be broken, creates this cynical attitude that certain bad things are just inevitable. We can't do anything about it. I, for one, refuse to give into that idea, and I refuse to let it stop us from taking action. Some have said, well, it's really just a mental health issue, that we just need to fix our behavioral health system, and this violence will end. Well, certainly there may be people with mental health issues who commit violent crimes, but the vast majority of people with those issues do not commit violent crimes. And it would be wrong to stereotype anyone who has mental health problems as a potentially violent individual. I have heard others say that we should not do anything until the independent commission finishes its work. Well, they're right that the findings of that commission may very well result in conclusions that need a policy remedy. And we will welcome the commission's conclusions when they're ready. But fixing our laws to address a single attack does nothing to anticipate those other acts of violence which we might, with wise actions, prevent. Actions which might also restore our sense of personal safety. Actions whose time, I believe, has come. Because for the sake of the communities, individuals, and families now suffering immeasurable pain, for the sake of our state, doing nothing is not an option. throughout my time in office, I've tried to bring people together, lawmakers and law enforcement, public health and others, to achieve enduring reforms that strengthen public safety, that protect our constitutional rights, and that honor Maine's long-standing outdoor traditions. And you, on a bipartisan basis, have agreed. Together, we've enacted laws that allow judges to remove weapons from people under domestic violence orders. Laws to ensure that survivors of domestic violence are notified if their abuser tries to buy a firearm. Penalties for straw purchases of firearms. Incentives for the safe storage of firearms. Funding for the Maine School Safety Center to help make our schools safe. And an extreme risk protection law to remove weapons from someone who's a danger to themselves or to others, with appropriate due process protections. These common sense measures were not easy to achieve. They were the product of great discussion and debate, but together we got them done. And to me, they are the type of pragmatic and responsible solutions that we can also achieve this session. In recent months, my office has talked with Republican and Democratic lawmakers and people and organizations across Maine, listening to ideas and concerns and trying to develop a balanced approach to this difficult issue. What I heard from folks all across the state is that they recognize the problem of gun violence. They see it in acts of domestic violence, of suicide, and mass shootings. And each person had ideas about what we could do to address the problem, and each of those ideas was different. But what was not different, what was largely agreed upon, was an overarching belief that violence prevention is important, that we have to strengthen our mental health system, and that dangerous people should not have access to firearms. So out of those discussions, tonight I'm announcing that I will be filing legislation to address these three major areas of concern. Legislation that would implement meaningful public safety protections, that would honor the rights afforded by our state and federal constitutions to safe and legal gun ownership, and that will uphold our state's long-standing outdoor heritage. First, let's talk about prevention. Many states have programs that approach the issue of violence through the broader lens of public health in order to understand and address long-term trends. Maine is not one of those states, and I'd like to do something to change that. Right now, data about violent injuries and deaths is kept separately in police reports, medical examiner files, vital records, emergency department records. Those things are not easy to understand and analyze. So tonight I propose we establish an injury and violence prevention program at the Maine CDC as a central hub to bring together all this information already collected by diverse entities and sectors like healthcare, education, social services, criminal justice agencies. Bringing together these data that will allow us to identify patterns to inform public health and prevention measures to reduce suicides and homicides in Maine. Now, let's do a better job at preventing violence to begin with and make Maine a safer state. Now let's talk about mental health. As I mentioned earlier, Maine, with almost unanimous bipartisan support, enacted an extreme risk protection law that allows a court to order the removal of dangerous weapons from an individual determined by a mental health professional to be a risk to themselves or others. Law enforcement first must take a person into protective custody, at which point they undergo a mental health evaluation, and a judge issues a decision on whether to temporarily remove their weapons. This law has come under some scrutiny since the Lewiston shooting, which is appropriate. It's always right to question whether our laws are adequately serving their intended purpose, and whether more, if anything, can be done to change or strengthen them. For example, Some have questioned the necessity of a mental health assessment, suggesting that it's an unnecessary hurdle that only makes the removal of weapons more difficult. But I believe that the mental health assessment strengthens our law, protects due process rights, and makes it less subject to being struck down if anyone were to challenge it. It also serves as a doorway to mental health services that might not otherwise be available to that person. So this law has been used 94 times in the past 97 days since October 25th. About once a day since the shooting in Lewiston, in courts all over the state, every county. About 15 times more often than it was used the 2.5, 3 years before that, when it was first implemented. The law is being used, and it is working. It's not to say that we shouldn't or can't strengthen the law. For example, we know that even with the progress we've made in recent years to expand behavioral health services, access to those services still can be a serious struggle. I want to expand behavioral health services, particularly for those in crisis. So I propose that we establish a network of crisis receiving centers across Maine so that any person suffering a mental health crisis can get prompt and appropriate care instead of being alone or languishing in an emergency department or a jail, as is too often the case. And I want to establish the next receiving center in Lewiston, which I will fund. And we will fund it in the forthcoming supplemental budget. My bill will direct the Department of Health and Human Services to expand these receiving centers over time into a broader network and provide greater access to services for people. We know those centers work. My administration, with your support, opened the first center in Portland in February 2022. In 20 months after that, nearly 3,000 people visited the center to get help and resolve a crisis. Since then, we've also announced plans to create a hybrid crisis receiving center in Kennebec County that offers substance use treatment as well. Crisis centers, crisis receiving centers work. Let's build on them. Now let's talk about how we can keep weapons out of the hands of people who shouldn't have them. We know that in the case of the Lewiston shooter, law enforcement officers were not able to take him into protective custody to initiate our extreme risk protection law to remove his weapons. Whether law enforcement could have or should have done something different is a question that is being heavily scrutinized. But to me, the fact that they were not able to do that also reveals a gap that must be addressed. What happens in the circumstance when a law enforcement officer knows where a person is, knows they're in trouble, causing trouble, but is unable to take them into protective custody and still believes they pose a likelihood of serious harm to themselves or others? My proposal will close that gap by allowing law enforcement to seek the approval of a judge in unusual circumstances to take a person into protective custody and, if deemed dangerous by a medical practitioner and a judge, remove their weapons pending a full court hearing. This will remove a barrier by providing law enforcement with another tool to find the person with a court order to ensure that someone's taken into protective custody and their weapons are removed. Well, this will strengthen the ability of law enforcement to remove weapons from dangerous people who already own them. What about preventing dangerous people from getting a weapon in the first place? I think we can address this too. When a person is subject to our extreme risk protection law, their name is entered into a national database of persons prohibited from having firearms, a database which includes convicted felons and people subject to a domestic violence order, among other things. In other words, people who we can all agree should not have a dangerous weapon. This is a process that works well if the individual attempts to buy a gun at a federally licensed firearm dealer, your local gun shop or Cabela's or LL Bean, for example. There, the dealers are required to verify that a person is legally allowed to buy a weapon through the National Instant Criminal Background Check System, or NICS. If that person is in NICS, then they're a prohibited person, and the system flags them, the sale is denied. But it's not a process that works well when that very same person can walk out of the gun shop and go to Facebook Marketplace or Craigslist or Uncle Henry's and buy through private commercial sale the same weapon they were just denied, a weapon they're not legally allowed to have. In 2016, the broad question of universal background checks was put to Maine people through referendum, whether they wanted to close this so-called private sale loophole. At the time, people rejected it. And that vote has framed my approach to the larger question since then, frankly. But now, in the aftermath of the violence we have seen across Maine, I've asked myself whether this approach is still the correct one. And I've arrived at the conclusion, I don't know how we can allow people who legally cannot have guns to buy them through a private sale and pose a risk to themselves or the public. And I do not know how we can hold commercial sellers to a higher standard while allowing an underground market of private commercial sellers to advertise guns for sale without any restrictions. In my conversations with Maine people, I believe they agree. People who can't legally own guns should not have such easy access to them. And I believe the time has come to address the issue of private gun sales. So I propose two things. One, that we require any sale of a firearm that is advertised, whether through Facebook, Craigslist, Uncle Henry's, a gun show, or other means, require them to be checked against the NICS system, the same system used by licensed firearms dealers. In doing so, we will ensure that when a gun is sold through an advertised sale, it cannot be sold to someone who's prohibited from having a firearm. Now, secondly, you're probably wondering, well, what about sales that are purely private and not advertised? It's a good question, and that's one I've thought a lot about too. Because these are the kind of transfers that are most often from one family member to another, from one trusted friend to another, from a neighbor to another. In other words, the type of sale or safe transfer among law-abiding gun owners that is common in our state. We have to acknowledge that someone could sell a weapon, again privately and unadvertised, without knowing whether the buyer is legally allowed to own a weapon. So I want to encourage people to make damn sure that if they're selling a firearm to someone they don't know, they should know that that person is legally allowed to own a gun. And that's something we can do in a way that respects our long-standing tradition of passing down family firearms from one generation to the next, or from one law-abiding gun owner to another. Now, please forgive me in advance. I swear the former Attorney General in me is going to come out. I know you're all surprised. Right now, it's a crime in Maine, a misdemeanor, for someone to intentionally or knowingly sell a firearm to someone who's a prohibited person. Intentionally or knowingly. Well, a lot's riding on whether or not you actually know. I don't think that's quite the right approach. It's too loose a standard. Because the bottom line is you should know, and most gun owners would want to know. It's common sense. It's the right thing to do. So let's change our law a bit to reflect that. Tonight I am proposing that we expand our law, improve it, by adding the term recklessly to intentionally or knowingly, making it a stronger standard and making it easier to successfully prosecute someone who does sell a gun to someone who's prohibited, not allowed to have a gun. And then on top of that, I propose we toughen the law to make that type of illegal sale a felony, not just a misdemeanor. What does all this mean in practicality? Well, it means if you're transferring a firearm to a relative or a friend you know is allowed to own one, you have nothing to worry about. Nothing changes. The long-standing tradition in Maine remains the same. It also means, look, if you're selling to a stranger, you should perhaps visit a licensed firearm dealer to check the NICS system and make sure they're not a prohibited person, because I'm sorry, I just didn't know. Just isn't going to fly like it used to. And you wouldn't want a felony charge and the possible prison time that comes along with that, nor would you want to be the one who made a sale to someone who then goes out and does something terrible. Now, I know it's quite a bit of stuff, so let me recap. Let's strengthen violence prevention by establishing an injury and violence prevention program at the Maine CDC. Let's expand our crisis mental health systems. Let's keep weapons out of the hands of dangerous people by strengthening our extreme risk protection law and by requiring those who advertise guns for sale to check the NICS system, and by toughening our law that already makes it illegal to transfer a firearm to a prohibited person. Prevention, mental health, keeping weapons away from dangerous persons, that's what my proposal boils down to. Now, I recognize that on the one hand, this legislation may be too little to those who believe that more is needed, while on the other hand, it may be too much to those who believe the opposite. But violence is not a simple problem, and the remedy is not a simple, single measure. And these proposals, I believe, represent progress, and they do not trample on anybody's rights. They are practical, common sense measures. They are not extreme or unusual. They are not a cookie-cutter version of some other state's laws. They are Maine-made and true to our culture and our long-standing traditions while meeting today's needs. If you are a law-abiding citizen who owns firearms in Maine, you'll have nothing to fear. If you're a collector of firearms in Maine, you have nothing to fear. If you like to hunt in Maine, deer, bear, duck, pheasant, coyotes, you have nothing to fear. And if you're a 14-year-old boy bowling with your dad on a weeknight in Lewiston, you too should have nothing to fear. If you are a truck driver, a postal carrier, or an ASL interpreter with a young wife and 4 kids at home, or a delivery driver taking an evening off to play cornhole with friends, you should have nothing to fear. If you're a 35-year-old father of 2 with another on the way who just got his bachelor's degree from USM, out for a bite to eat with friends, you should have nothing to fear. Over the last few months, I've been to too many funerals, expressing your condolences for all of you, to the loved ones of too many lost too soon. And I've sat with myself and my own conscience, reflecting upon what is right for Maine in the wake of Lewiston and of Bodenham, and of the tragedies of suicide and domestic violence that are all too prevalent in our society. I hope that you too, as elected officials of the people, will do the same, reflecting not only on what you may think is right or best, but on what those who disagree with you believe is best as well. The issue of guns in America is so often marred with acrimony and divisiveness, tending to polarize people of goodwill, further entrenching people in already deeply held beliefs and positions, hardening our uncharitable opinions of one another, and widening a great divide that only serves to immobilize us and obscure reasonable solutions. Let us not lose our way in the vitriol and heated rhetoric that too often accompanies these debates. Let us have substantive, respectful, vigorous discussions and arrive at solutions that work for our state, for our people. It's worth doing for the victims of yesterday's horrors, for the survivors of today, and the vulnerable of tomorrow. It is worth doing for Ron Moran, for Peyton Brewer Ross, for Josh Seal, Brian McFarling, Joe Walker, Arthur Strout, Max Hathaway, Steve Vazella, Thomas Ryan Conrad, Michael Delorier II, Jason Walker, Tricia Aslin, William Young, Aaron Young, Bob Violet, Lucy Violet, Billy Brackett, Keith McNear. And for Cynthia Eaton and David Eaton and Robert Eager, Patricia Eager. For the people who took their own lives and those who were killed by an abuser. For the family and friends who now have to live with the unimaginable pain that comes from losing a loved one to violence. And for anyone who survived that violence but who can never fully heal. We have a lot of work to do in this body, creating and debating proposals that are balanced and measured with care, with dignity, but it is worthwhile because one of the fundamental obligations of government is to keep people safe. As I close, I cannot escape the troubling fact that violence has become all too common in our culture. Acts of brutality, cruelty, and anger are glorified and normalized in video games, TV shows, films, and social media. Acts that reduce our humanity, that leave us angry and bitter towards one another. Acts that are part of a culture that too often promotes violence as a way to address but never really resolve differences. As a society, we've got to consider how we can reject the vitriol that too often consumes us, how we can tune out the rhetoric of rage, how we can recognize the humanity and dignity of others through our own eyes, and how we can lead with grace, compassion, and understanding in our own private and public lives. We can't legislate all of this. Instead, I think the true solution lies in our hearts, in the lessons we impart to our children, in our daily interactions with each other, in our spiritual faith as a people who, despite many differences, truly have more in common than we know. We who walk this same earth, breathe this same air, striving for purpose, happiness, the chance to love and be loved, to be safe, and perhaps to make just a small positive difference in our short, blessed time on this earth. My friends, we cannot this month, this spring, alone, heal every damaged heart or broken life, or pretend that we are immune from acts that tear us apart. Nor can we repair every broken brick of every damaged bridge, replace every washed out culvert, reweave our wooden wharfs, or reimagine the contours of our coast in a single moment. We will never forget Lewiston, but neither will we let October 25th define us. We have to embrace each other and believe in each other every day. We are still a civil, safe, and welcoming state with a backbone as strong as Katahdin. We are who we always have been, a people with a deep and abiding sense of right and wrong, determined to look out for one another, knowing how very lucky we are to live in this beautiful state. And so we will repair this scar of violence on our communal soul, just as we rebuild our wharves, beaches, and bridges with a cohesive will and a consciousness of the future. As we fortify our state against the ravages of unpredictable storms and the predictability of climate change, so will we restore and strengthen our sense of personal security and collective safety based on the principles of the Golden Rule, protecting others as we would protect ourselves in our state and in our nation. And fundamentally, we will continue to look within ourselves and to each other for the confidence, courage, and compassion to face the future, to weather things we've never weathered before, to defeat the dangers of today and prevent the disasters of tomorrow as we replenish our souls and renew our indomitable sense of hope. One people made up of many, with one purpose, one broad vision, to be the best we can for ourselves, for our family, for each other, and for our state. I know that we can because we are, all of us, the people of the great state of Maine. And the state of our people is good. The state of our state is strong. And as always, it is a privilege and honor to serve as your governor. Thank you.
Good evening. I'm Trey Stewart from Aroostook County, the Senate Republican leader.
And I'm Billy Bob Fockingham from Winter Harbor, the House Republican leader. Thank you for joining us tonight for the Republican response to the Governor's State of the State address.
First and foremost, we must pause from any political message to express our sincere and utmost condolences to the families and friends of the victims of the senseless tragedy that occurred in Lewiston last year.
We will continue to support these folks however we can and stand together in honoring their memory and their lives. As for the response, we need to set the record straight on a few things that the governor shared today.
While she can try to paint a different version of reality for Maine's people, we know that you aren't buying it. The cold, hard truth of our economy under Democrat control is that Maine people are struggling and things have gotten worse, not better, on their watch. You don't need to be an economist to recognize that when your bills are rising faster than your paychecks, it's harder to make ends meet for your family. And nursing homes are closing across the state for a lack of a plan and leadership, leaving families to struggle with the consequences. It seems like the only thing that's gotten cheaper under Maine Democrats is lobster prices and cannabis. What's worse is gaslighting people into thinking that everything is fine.
Governor Mills was elected in 2018. For 3 consecutive terms, Democrats have controlled the governor's office, the Senate, the House, and all constitutional offices. Democrats think they can control the weather by making us suffer. Unless you want to freeze in your homes or be stranded because a battery-powered car is dead, the Democrats are not working for you. Governor Mills was elected at a time when the economy was thriving under a Republican president. When that president was replaced, the state of Maine benefited from an astronomical amount of federal funding, money printed out of thin air. I am here today to declare that the state of the state is an illusion. It is a house of cards on the verge of collapse.
Well said. Next, let's wade into the waters of immigration for a moment. Under current leadership, Maine has rolled out the red carpet and turned into the northernmost all-inclusive resort for anyone and everyone. Free new housing, free healthcare, free food, you name it, we're giving it away. All courtesy of the good, hard-working folks of Maine. While Texas has garnered the national spotlight on this topic, it's hitting close to home too. In my own district in Aroostook County, illegal immigrants are crossing our border in droves and being released because of the same failed Democrat policies you see in Texas. They're given court dates 4 years later and never seen again. You can't make this up. Our country and our state are in dire need of solutions to these problems.
For Republicans, the solution is simple. Believe in the Maine people. Believe in their decisions. Help them by not making things harder for them. This has been a giant wealth transfer from working people to support more government. Why should government get larger and larger while family budgets get smaller? Are you better off than you were 6 years ago? The government is taking from family budgets and paying for windmills, wiping out our skylines and threatening our pristine ocean waters. The government is paying for undocumented immigrants to have 2 years of free housing while our homeless suffer.
That's right, Billy Bob. Unfortunately, there are now more sightings of illegal Chinese marijuana operations, used needles in the streets, and homeless tent cities than there are moose sightings. Portland, Maine is giving Portland, Oregon a run for its money as the poster child for how to create a socialist utopia and fail miserably. We've become the greenhouse capital of New England, and not the kind that's helping the environment. Our overdose deaths as a result of fentanyl entering our state have only gotten worse since the pandemic. Our state can't even keep our children safe, with more children dying on the state's watch year over year. Folks, Maine is in a race to the bottom, and we're winning.
Unfortunately, the Maine people are losing. I wanted the governor to show leadership by publicly calling on the Secretary of State to let people decide whom they want to vote for. I wanted the governor to lower the tax and regulatory burden on Maine people. I wanted the governor to commit to lower electric rates by reversing the flow of money to out-of-state solar and wind corporations. There's no reason to pay artificially high prices just to follow a California agenda that will destroy our state.
And if all that's not bad enough, kids in Maine schools are being fed a new curriculum that should concern every mother and father in our state. One where keeping secrets from your parents is the new extra credit, and common sense and obvious truths get pushed aside for the liberal agenda. You may have even heard in the national news about one Democrat proposal to legalize child trafficking to get sex change surgery without parental knowledge. It is time for our collective voice to rise in a resounding chorus that declares enough.
I know I've had enough, Trey. I wanted the governor to publicly call on the Board of Environmental Protection to abandon their efforts to mandate electric vehicles. In a wild twist of irony, that decision was only postponed because of a storm that caused widespread power outages. Imagine if that storm happened when an EV mandate was in effect.
Look, folks, we know the real guardians of Maine's future aren't seated in the legislative halls. They're standing strong in every home, every town, every heart across our state. So, let's march forward, not just in frustration, but with purpose. Our actions today will shape the Maine of tomorrow. We must recognize the truth of where we are at including the harsh reality of life under total Democrat control. Together, we can lift the veil from our eyes and recognize that we are in control of our own future. We have the tools to reshape our trajectory and make sure that the next generation will be better off than our own. That all starts with this November's election.
That's right, Trey. The course of Maine's future is chosen by her people. We all know what the problems are. Republicans have been offering solutions. Our solutions let individual Mainers decide what is best for their lives. Let citizens keep more of what they earn. Let citizens decide what kind of car they want to drive. Let citizens decide whom they want to vote for on the ballot. Prioritize those who live here before others who skip the line for welfare benefits. If those seem simple, it's because it's common sense. People know what is best for their lives, not the government. Republicans believe in the Maine people. We believe in you.
Thank you for tuning in tonight to the Republican Response.
May God bless you and God bless the state of Maine.